Afghanistan, 2008. The radio crackled with panic. Viper 6, we have casualties. Medevac is 3 minutes out, but the shooter has us pinned. I repeat, we are pinned down. He's hitting us from somewhere past 800 meters, and we can't... Static, then screaming. In the operations center at Fort Benning, Georgia, General Morrison watched the helmet cam footage with growing dread. 4. American soldiers were trapped behind a disabled Humvee. A sniper, one man with one rifle, had brought an entire patrol to its knees. "Where's our counter-sniper team?" Morrison demanded. "Already deployed, sir. They fired 23 rounds, no hits. The target is outside effective range for their equipment in these conditions, and..." Another shot rang out on the feed. A soldier went down. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered. Morrison watched as his highly trained, superbly equipped marksmen failed to neutralize a single enemy combatant. They had the finest rifles money could buy. Scopes that could see in the dark, rangefinders that calculated wind and drop automatically, and they were losing to one man with an old Russian rifle. The medevac arrived. The patrol escaped. But Morrison couldn't shake the image from his mind. American soldiers with millions of dollars of technology, defeated by a shooter with probably less than $1,000 worth of equipment. That night, Morrison made a call he'd been avoiding for 5 years. He called a man who'd retired from the army before the soldiers in that ambush were even born. He called a man who'd made impossible shots with, impossible equipment. He called the only person he knew who understood that killing wasn't about the weapon. It was about the man behind it. 2 weeks later, rural Georgia. The rain hammered against the windows of the small farmhouse with the kind of persistence that only autumn storms possess. Inside, Thomas Garrett sat in his worn leather chair, the one his wife had threatened to throw out, 12 times before she passed. His weathered hands cradled a cup of black coffee, steam rising in lazy spirals toward the ceiling. At 73, most men would be content with their memories, their gardens, their grandchildren. Thomas had all of those things, but lately, the memories had grown heavier. He stared at the wooden case against the wall, covered with a blanket that hadn't been moved in 5 years. Inside that case was a rifle that had taken 37 lives and saved countless more. He wondered which number was harder to live with. The phone rang, an old rotary model that Thomas had refused to replace despite his daughter's protests about entering the 21st century. He knew who it was before he picked up. When the army needed something from you, they had a way of making the phone ring at exactly the right or wrong moment. He set down his coffee and reached for the receiver. "Garrett residence. Is this Master Sergeant Thomas Garrett?" The voice was young, crisp, military. Thomas felt something tighten in his chest. He hadn't heard that rank spoken aloud in over 2 decades. "Retired. Who's asking?" "Sir, my name is Captain Rodriguez, United States Army. Marksmanship Unit. I'm calling on behalf of General Morrison. We have a situation, sir, and we need your help." Thomas was quiet for a moment, listening to the rain. "I'm 73 years old, Captain. My days of being useful to the Army are long past. Sir, with respect, that's not what our records indicate, or what everyone who's ever served under you says." There was a pause. "Master, Sergeant, we have the best equipment money can buy. The finest rifles, the most advanced optics, computer-assisted targeting systems. But we're turning out marksmen who can't shoot. Can't shoot or won't shoot. Both, sir, neither. I don't know anymore." The captain's voice carried a frustration that Thomas recognized. "They're failing basic qualification courses, not the physical stuff. They're fit. They're motivated. But when they get behind the rifle, something's missing. The instructors are following the manual to the letter, but it's not working. General Morrison remembered you. He said if anyone could figure out what's broken, it would be you." Thomas looked across the room to where an old wooden case rested against the wall, covered with a blanket that hadn't been moved in 5 years. Inside that case was a rifle that had been manufactured in 1953, a weapon older than most of the soldiers who would be holding their state-of-the-art equipment. "When would you need me?" "Tomorrow, if possible, sir." Thomas allowed himself a small smile. The Army hadn't changed. When they wanted something, they wanted it yesterday. "I'll need to make arrangements, day after tomorrow, and Captain. Yes, sir. Tell General Morrison I'm bringing my own rifle. Fort Benning sprawled under a gray October sky, its buildings and ranges looking much as Thomas remembered them, yet somehow different. The vehicles were newer, the soldiers younger, though they had always been younger. What struck him most was the silence. He remembered this place as loud, alive with the crack of rifles and the shouted cadences of drill sergeants. Now it felt muted, almost uncertain. Captain Rodriguez met him at the main gate, a compact man in his mid-30s with the kind of bearing that suggested he'd seen combat. They shook hands, and Thomas noted the firmness of the captain's grip, not trying to prove anything, just confident. Master Sergeant Garrett, it's an honor. General Morrison is waiting for us at the range. They drove through the base in a new Humvee that rode far too smoothly for Thomas's taste. The old ones had rattled your teeth loose, but you always knew where you stood with them. Tell me about these shooters you've got, Captain. Rodriguez kept his eyes on the road. They're good soldiers, sir. Smart, fit, dedicated. Average age 22. Most of them grew up playing video games with rifle simulations that are supposedly more accurate than the real thing. They can quote ballistics tables from memory. They understand wind drift, the Coriolis effect, all of it. On paper, they should be the best marksmen we've ever produced. But they can't hit a man-sized target at 300 meters consistently. We've replaced the rifles 3 times, changed the optics, brought in sports psychologists. Nothing works. Thomas was quiet for a moment. You said video games. Yes, sir. And they understand the theory. Perfectly, sir. But have they ever been hungry? Really hungry? Have they ever been so cold they couldn't feel their fingers? Have they waited in the same position for 6 hours because moving would mean dying? Rodriguez glanced at him. Most of them haven't deployed yet, sir. That's not what I asked. They pulled up to a range where a group of about 30 soldiers stood in formation. Behind them, Thomas could see the firing line equipped with the kind of technology that would have seemed like science fiction during his service. Computer screens, wind meters, rangefinders that probably cost more than his first car. General. Morrison stepped forward as Thomas climbed out of the Humvee. The general was in his late 50s, gray at the temples, with the lean build of a man who still ran 5 miles every morning. They had served together briefly in the Gulf, though Morrison had been a lieutenant then. Master Sergeant Garrett. Morrison extended his hand. Thank you for coming. General. Thomas shook his hand. Though, I'm not sure what you expect me to do that your regular instructors can't. Morrison smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Thomas, I've got senators asking why we're spending millions on training and equipment and still producing shooters who can't shoot. I've got young men and women who want to be excellent and are failing despite doing everything right. And I've got a gut feeling that we've lost something fundamental in all our advancement. He gestured toward the soldiers. I want you to watch them shoot. Don't tell them who you are yet. Just watch. Then tell me what you see. Thomas stood behind the firing line as the soldiers took their positions. Each one had a rifle that Thomas had to admit was a work of art. Precision machined components, adjustable stocks, optics that could probably see into next week. The range was set up with targets at various distances, the closest at 100 meters, the furthest at 600. A sergeant, young, probably 30, walked the line, checking positions. His corrections were textbook perfect. Elbow here, cheek weld there, breathing control, trigger discipline, everything by the manual. Shooters, you may commence firing when... Ready, the sergeant called out. The first shots rang out, and Thomas watched. Not the targets. He'd look at those later. He watched the shooters. A young woman in the middle of the line, probably 21 or 22, fired her first shot. Thomas saw her immediately check the spotting scope, mounted next to her position, studying where the round hit. She made an adjustment to her scope. Fired. Again, checked again. 3 shots, 3 checks. Down the line, a tall corporal did the same thing. Fire, check, adjust. Fire, check, adjust. They were treating it like a video game. Take a shot, see where it landed, correct for the next one. No feel for the weapon, no understanding that sometimes you had to trust your initial sight picture and follow through. But that wasn't the real problem. The sight, real problem was deeper. Thomas walked slowly behind the line, saying nothing, just watching. One shooter flinched before every trigger pull. Another was muscling the rifle, fighting it instead of working with it. A third was breathing all wrong, taking rapid, shallow breaths when he should have been settling into a natural respiratory pause. These weren't bad soldiers. They were simply disconnected. They were performing the mechanical actions of shooting without understanding the why behind them. After 30 minutes, the ceasefire was called. Thomas walked down to look at the targets with Rodriguez and Morrison. The results were mediocre at best. At 100 meters, most shooters had kept their groups within a dinner plate. Acceptable, but not impressive. At 300 meters, the groups had opened up to the size of a truck tire. At 600 meters, several shooters hadn't hit the target at all. Morrison looked at him. "Well, they're thinking too much," Thomas said, "and not feeling enough." "I'm not sure I follow, sir," Rodriguez said. Thomas turned to look at the line of soldiers who were now cleaning their weapons under the watchful eye of their shahs. "Sergeant, every one of those young people can probably tell you the exact muzzle velocity of their ammunition. They can calculate trajectory drop to the decimal point. They know every specification of their weapon system, but not one of them knows their rifle." "Sir?" Rodriguez looked genuinely confused. "Come with me," Thomas said. Thomas walked to the Humvee where he'd left the wooden case. Soldiers watched as he carried it to a bench near the firing line and set it down carefully. The case was old, scarred, held together by brass latches that had turned green with age. He opened it slowly. Inside, nested in foam that had been cut to fit, was a rifle that looked like it belonged in a museum. It was a Winchester Model 70, chambered in .30-06 Springfield, manufactured in 1953. The wood. Stock was dark with age and use, worn smooth in places where hands had gripped it for decades. The bluing on the barrel had worn through in spots. The scope was a simple Weaver, probably 40 years old, with no digital readouts or ranging computers. A young private, couldn't have been more than 19, let out a small laugh before catching himself. Thomas didn't react. He'd expected it. "That's your rifle, sir?" Rodriguez asked carefully. "This is the rifle I carried through 2 tours in Vietnam, one in the Gulf, and a dozen other places that don't officially exist in any records," Thomas said. He lifted it from the case with the kind of care you'd show a sleeping child. "It's older than every person standing here. The scope is probably less powerful than the one on your deer rifle back home. It has no rangefinder, no wine meter, no ballistics computer." He held it up so everyone could see. "This rifle is common, basic, some might say obsolete." Thomas turned to Morrison. "General, with your permission, I'd like to demonstrate something." Morrison nodded. "The range is yours, Master Sergeant." Thomas walked to the firing line. He didn't lie down in the prone position like the others had. Instead, he sat, cross-legged, the old-fashioned sitting position that nobody taught anymore. He brought the rifle up, settled it against his shoulder, and took a breath. For a moment, he simply sat there, completely still. The soldiers watched in silence. Then, without any apparent preparation, he fired. The sound was different from the modern rifles, deeper, rounder, more organic. Thomas didn't check a spotting scope. He didn't look at a computer screen. He simply worked the bolt, ejected the spent casing, chambered another round, and fired again. 5 shots in perhaps 30 seconds. He stood up, safed the rifle, and set it down. "Captain Rodriguez, would you mind checking the target at 300 meters?" Rodriguez walked down range with a spotting scope. Even from a distance, Thomas could see him stop, look closer, then lower the scope and look back. "Sir, all 5 shots are within a 3-inch circle, center mass." There was a murmur from the soldiers. Thomas heard the young private who'd laughed whisper to his buddy, "No way. That rifle doesn't even have a proper scope." Thomas turned to face the formation. "Who wants to tell me why I was able to do that?" A female corporal raised her hand tentatively. "Sir, you have more experience." "True, but that's not the answer." "Next," a sergeant spoke up. "You understand the fundamentals better, sir. Getting warmer. Anyone else?" Silence. Then a young specialist in the back, a thin kid with glasses, spoke quietly. You weren't trying to shoot good, sir. You were just shooting. Thomas pointed at him. What's your name, soldier? Specialist Chen, sir. Specialist Chen just gave you the answer. I wasn't trying. I was doing. He gestured to the modern rifles. Every single one of you has a better weapon than mine. Objectively, mechanically, technically better in every way. Your rifles are more accurate. Your ammunition is more consistent. Your optics are superior. He paused. But you, don't trust them. You don't trust yourselves. You're so busy calculating, adjusting, correcting, that you never actually shoot. You're performing a task instead of executing a skill. Thomas picked up his old Winchester again. This rifle has no computers, no advanced ballistics. When I look through this scope, I see a simple crosshair and a target. That's it. So what do I rely on? He waited. Nobody answered. I rely on the rifle to do what it was built to do, and I rely on myself to do what I was trained to do. That's it. Not faith, trust. Trust built on thousands of rounds fired, hundreds of hours behind the trigger. This rifle and I have an understanding. When I do my part, it does its part. A lieutenant raised his hand. Sir, with respect, that sounds like a lot of mysticism for what's essentially just mathematics and mechanics. Thomas smiled. You're right to be skeptical, Lieutenant. Let me show you it's not mysticism. Captain Rodriguez, pick any 3 soldiers at random. They can use any rifle here, including mine. Rodriguez selected 3 soldiers. The young private who'd laughed, a female corporal who'd been one of the better shooters that morning, and Specialist A. Chen, the quiet one who'd understood about not trying. Here's the exercise, Thomas said. You 3 are going to take turns shooting at the 300-meter target, 1 shot each. Before you shoot, I'm going to tell you where your round will impact. Not after, before. The private looked skeptical. Sir, how can you know that? By watching you, Thomas said simply. Private, you're first. Take any rifle you want. The private selected one of the modern precision rifles, topped with an expensive scope. He got into position, prone on the firing line. Thomas walked over and observed him for a moment. You're going to miss left, he said. About 6 inches left, 2 inches low. The private lined up his shot. Thomas could see the determination on his face. He was going to prove the old man wrong. He controlled his breathing, acquired the target, and squeezed the trigger. Rodriguez checked through the spotting scope. 5 inches left, 3 inches low. The private's face fell. How did you know? Your left elbow, Thomas said. You're pulling it too far in, which is torquing your body, and cant the rifle slightly. You can't see it because it feels natural to you. But I can see it. The rifle is doing exactly what you're telling it to do. You're just telling it the wrong thing. He turned to the corporal. You're next. She took position with a different rifle, a setup she was familiar with. Thomas watched her settle in. High right, he said. Maybe 4 inches high, 3 inches right. She fired. Rodriguez called it. 4 inches high, 2 inches right. The corporal looked stunned. But I did everything by the manual, sir. You did, Thomas agreed. But you're anticipating the recoil. See how your shoulder tenses up right before you pull the trigger? You're trying to control the rifle instead of letting it recoil naturally. That tension is pushing you up and to the right. He turned to Specialist Chen. Your turn. Chen took position, but instead of reaching. For one of the modern rifles, he looked at Thomas's Winchester. Sir, may I use yours? Thomas felt something shift in the air. Rodriguez and Morrison exchanged glances. The other soldiers leaned in closer. You may, Thomas said. Chen carefully picked up the old rifle, settling into position with it. He took his time, not rushing. Thomas watched him find his natural point of aim, watched him work, with the rifle instead of fighting it. Well, sir, Chen asked, where am I going to hit? Thomas smiled. Center mass, within 2 inches of point of aim. Chen took a breath, let half of it out, and squeezed the trigger. The old Winchester barked. Center mass, Rodriguez called. 1 inch low, 1 inch right. The soldiers erupted in surprised chatter. Chen stood up, a look of wonder on his face. I felt it, he said. I actually felt when it was right. That's the difference, Thomas said to the assembled soldiers. Specialist Chen stopped trying to shoot perfectly and just shot. He trusted the process instead of trying to control every variable. He held up the Winchester. This rifle is common, old, basic, but in the right hands, it's still effective. The question you all need to answer is, are you the right hands? General Morrison stepped forward. Master Sergeant Garrett, we're listening. Tell us what we're doing wrong. Thomas looked at the 30 soldiers gathered around. Most of them were young enough to be his grandchildren, but their eyes held the same hunger to understand that he'd seen in soldiers throughout his career. It's not what you're doing wrong, Thomas E. said. It's what you're not doing at all. You're being taught mechanics without art, science without instinct. It's like teaching someone to swim by having them read a book about fluid dynamics. He set his rifle down carefully on the bench. How many of you grew up shooting? 3 hands went up out of 30. How many of you have fired more than 1,000 rounds outside of your military? Training? The same 3 hands. 1 dropped. Thomas nodded slowly. There's your first problem. You can't build instinct in a classroom or with a manual. You build it by doing over and over until the rifle becomes an extension of yourself. But sir, the lieutenant from earlier spoke up. We're on limited ranges and ammunition budgets. We can't just shoot thousands of rounds. You don't need thousands of rounds to learn the fundamentals, Thomas countered. You need hundreds of repetitions of doing it right. The Army has confused quantity with quality. He picked up his Winchester again. In Vietnam, I had maybe 300 rounds total over 2 years, but every single one of them mattered. I didn't spray and pray. I made each shot count, which meant I learned something from each shot. He looked at Captain Rodriguez. Captain, with your permission, I'd like to try something different with your soldiers. Whatever you need, sir. First thing, everyone put away the spotting scopes. There was a murmur of confusion. Sir? Rodriguez questioned. Spotting scopes. Put them away. From now on, when you shoot, you call your shot before you check where it hit. You tell me where. You think you placed the round based on what you felt when you pulled the trigger. Then and only then you check the target. But sir, how will we know what adjustments to make? The corporal asked. That's the point. You're going to learn to feel the shot. When you pull the trigger, you should know. Not think, not guess, but know where that round is going. If you called high right and the round hit high right, you're developing awareness. If you called center and you hit low left, you need to figure out why your perception didn't match reality. Thomas walked along the line of modern rifles. Second thing, pick one rifle, just one. Learn everything about that specific weapon. Not rifles in general, not the manual specifications, that individual rifle, how it feels when you pick it up, how the trigger breaks, how it sits against your shoulder, where the balance point is. You should be able to pick up your rifle in the dark and know immediately if something is off. He turned to face them all. Third, and most important, we're going to slow everything down. No more rapid fire for qualification. No more treating this like a race. One shot, one breath, one moment of complete focus. You're going to learn to make every shot deliberate. Specialist Chen raised his hand. Sir, what about in combat? We don't always have time to be deliberate. Excellent question. In combat, you default to your training. If your training is fast and sloppy, your combat shooting will be fast and sloppy. But if your training is deliberate and precise, then even under stress, even moving fast, you'll have that foundation of precision to draw from. Thomas met Chen's eyes. The goal isn't to make you slow. The goal is to make you accurate. Speed without accuracy is just noise. General Morrison stepped forward. Master Sergeant, I'm giving you full authority over the marksmanship program for the next 30 days. Whatever you need, you've got it. Thomas felt the weight of that. Responsibility. 30 days to undo however many months or years of ingrained habits and misconceptions. Thank you, sir, but I need one more thing. Name it. I need these soldiers to be willing to fail, really fail, to miss targets, to look foolish, to struggle, because right now they're so afraid of failing that they're not letting themselves learn. The next morning, Thomas had the soldiers form up at 0600, but not on the firing range. Instead, he'd requisitioned an empty warehouse on the base. No rifles today, he announced as they filed in, earning looks of confusion. The warehouse was empty, except for 30 broomsticks leaning against the wall. Everyone grab a broomstick. That's your rifle for the next 3 hours. Sir, the lieutenant spoke up. I don't understand. We need to be shooting. No, Thomas corrected. You need to be learning positions and movements that your body doesn't fight. Grab a broomstick. For the next 3 hours, Thomas drilled them on positions. Prone, sitting, kneeling, standing. But not just getting into the positions, understanding why each position worked the way it did. He had them hold their rifles until their arms shook, teaching them, where the natural support points were in their skeleton rather than their muscles. If you're using muscle strength to hold your position, you're doing it wrong, he explained, walking among them as they struggled to hold their broomsticks steady. Your skeleton is a structure. It wants to support weight. Your muscles want to move. Learn to let your bones do the work. Private Martinez, the one, Claes, who'd laughed at Thomas's old rifle, was shaking after 2 minutes in the sitting position. Sir, I can't hold this any longer. That's because you're muscling it. Look at Specialist Chen. Chen, smaller and slighter than Martinez, was rock steady. Chen, explain what you're doing. I'm not holding the rifle up, sir. I'm letting it rest on my knees and my elbows are braced on my thighs. I'm just being a platform. The rifle is holding itself up. Exactly. Martinez, try again. But this time, find the position where the broomstick wants to be, not where you think it should be. They worked positions until everyone could hold steady for 5 minutes without shaking. Then Thomas moved them to the next phase. Now we're going to work on trigger control, still with the broomsticks. He demonstrated with his own broomstick, pressing an imaginary trigger. When you press the trigger, nothing else should move. Not your hand, not your arm, not your shoulder. Just that one finger, moving straight back. Sounds simple. It's not. He had them practice dry-firing their broomsticks, pressing an imaginary trigger hundreds of times, with a partner watching to see if anything else moved. You're dipping the barrel, he told Corporal Hayes. Sir, I'm trying not to. I know you are, but trying isn't enough. You've trained yourself to flinch in anticipation of the shot. We're going to untrain that reflex. By lunch, the soldiers were exhausted and frustrated, and they hadn't fired a single round. Sir, Lieutenant Dawson approached him. The other instructors are asking questions. They think we're wasting time. What do you think, Lieutenant? Dawson was quiet for a moment. Honestly, I'm not sure, but I haven't thought this hard about the fundamentals since basic training. Good. This afternoon, we shoot, but not the way you're used to. They returned to the range after lunch, but Thomas had them set up differently, instead of the usual firing line with everyone shooting. At once, he had one shooter at a time step forward. Everyone else watches, he instructed. You're going to learn as much from watching others as from shooting yourself. He started with Chen, since he'd shown the most aptitude. Specialist, pick your rifle. Chen selected the same one he'd used the day before and took position at the 100-meter line. Before you load, Thomas said, tell me about your rifle. Sir, tell me about that specific rifle. What does it feel like? Chen paused, then spoke thoughtfully. The stock is a little longer than I'd like. The trigger breaks clean but with more weight than I'm used to. It wants to sit a little heavy in the front. Good. You're paying attention. Now load one round. Just one. Chen loaded a single cartridge. Don't look at the target. Look at the horizon. Breathe naturally. When you're ready, close your eyes and bring the rifle to your shoulder. Find your natural point of aim with your eyes closed. Chen did as instructed. The watching soldiers were completely silent. Now open your eyes. Where is the reticle? About 2 feet left of the target, sir. That's your natural point of aim. That's where your body wants the rifle to be. Now, adjust your body, not the rifle, until your natural point of aim is on target. Chen shifted his hips, adjusted his position slightly, closed his eyes again, reopened them. On target, sir. Now take the shot, but before you do, tell me where it's going to hit. Center mass, sir. No, be specific. Call it like a clock face. 12 o'clock is high, 6 o'clock is low. Chen settled in behind the rifle. 1 o'clock, 2 inches from center. He fired. Rodriguez checked through the spotting scope. 1 o'clock, 2 inches from center. The watching soldiers stirred with interest. Chen, why did you call that? Thomas asked. I felt the crosshair drift slightly high right just as I broke the trigger, sir. And did you try to correct it? No, sir. The trigger was already moving. Exactly right. You called the shot honestly. That's worth more than a perfect hit that you can't explain. Thomas turned to the group. Chen's shot was slightly off-center, but he knew it would be. That's mastery. That's awareness. Chen, go again. 5 more rounds. Call each one before you check. Chen shot 5 more times. He called 4 of them perfectly. The 5th, he called. Center. But it hit low. What happened on that last one? Thomas asked. I'm not sure, sir. I thought it was good. Watch your breathing. You pulled the trigger while you were still exhaling. Your chest was still moving. Try again, but this time, shoot at your natural respiratory pause. The next shot was dead center. Thomas turned to the group. Who's next? Over the next week, a pattern emerged. Some soldiers took to Thomas's methods immediately. Others fought them, frustrated by the slow pace and the constant emphasis on self-awareness over scores. Private Martinez was one of the latter. After his 4th session, he approached Thomas with visible frustration. Sir, with respect, I've been shooting worse since we started this training. My groupings are bigger, my times are slower. The old way was working better for me. Thomas nodded. You're right. You are shooting worse right now. Martinez blinked, clearly expecting an argument. Sir, you're shooting worse because you're unlearning bad habits. It's like breaking down your golf swing to fix a slice. You get worse before you get better. The question is, do you want to be mediocre now or excellent later? But, sir, what if I need to qualify? What if you deploy and you're behind a rifle that really matters and you miss because you never learned to truly shoot? Thomas's voice was gentle but firm. Martinez, I've been where you'll be. I've taken shots that meant the difference between my friends going home or going to Arlington. You don't want to be learning these lessons when the stakes are that high. Martinez was quiet for a long moment. What do I need to fix, sir? Your flinch. You're anticipating the recoil so hard that you're moving before the shot breaks. We're going to fix that. But it's going to take time, and it's going to be frustrating. How long, sir? As long as it takes. But I promise you this. When we're done, you'll trust yourself in ways you never have. Thomas spent the next 3 days with Martinez doing nothing but dry fire exercises. No live rounds, just repetitions of proper trigger press, over and over, until Martinez could press the trigger without moving anything else. It's boring, sir, Martinez complained on the 2nd day. So is digging a fighting position, so is standing watch. Being a soldier means mastering the boring fundamentals, so you can execute when it's not boring. On the 4th day, Thomas let Martinez fire live rounds again. His first group at 100 meters was 5 shots within a 2-inch circle. Martinez stared at the target in disbelief. Sir, I've never shot that well. You always could. You were just in your own way. But not everyone progressed smoothly. Corporal Hayes was struggling with something deeper than technique. She could shoot well on calm days, but the moment there was wind or pressure or time limits, she fell apart. After her 3rd session ending in tears of frustration, Thomas asked her to stay behind. Talk to me, Corporal. What's happening? I don't know, sir. I just freeze. Everything I know disappears. Have you always been like this? She hesitated, then nodded. My whole life. Tests, competitions, anything with pressure. I know the material. I know what to do, but when it matters, I can't perform. Thomas sat down on the bench beside her. Hayes, I'm going to tell you something that none of the manuals say. You don't trust yourself. Sir, you don't, and that's not your fault. Somewhere along the way, someone or something taught you that you're not capable under pressure. But here's the truth. You are. I've watched you. When you're not thinking about it, when you're just shooting, you're good. Better than good. But the second you remember that it matters, you sabotage yourself. How do I fix that, sir? By giving yourself permission to fail. Really fail. Spectacularly, embarrassingly fail. Hayes looked at him like he was crazy. Tomorrow morning, You're going to shoot in front of everyone, and I'm going to put so much pressure on you that you're going to miss. A lot. And when you do, nothing bad is going to happen. The world won't end. No one will think less of you. You'll just miss, and then you'll shoot again. Sir, that sounds terrible. It will be. But once you've faced your worst fear and survived it, it won't have power over you anymore. The next morning, true to his word, Thomas had Hayes shoot in front of the entire unit. He gave her artificial time limits. He had people talk while she was shooting. He changed targets mid-string. She missed a lot, and she cried. And the other soldiers didn't laugh or judge. They watched her fight through it, and several looked like they recognized their own struggles in hers. After 30 minutes of terrible shooting, Thomas called a ceasefire. Corporal Hayes, how do you feel? Humiliated, sir. Good. How do you feel about shooting now? She thought about it. Less scared, I guess. I already did the worst possible job. Can't get worse than that. Exactly. Now take a breath. No time limit. No pressure. Just you and the rifle. Show me what you can do when you're not afraid. Hayes loaded a fresh magazine. She settled into position, and she shot a perfect 5-round group at 300 meters. The unit erupted in applause. Hayes stood up, stunned. What just happened, sir? You got out of your own way, Thomas said. Remember this feeling. This is what you're capable of when you trust yourself. The story spread through the unit, and something shifted. The soldiers stopped being afraid of looking bad in front of Thomas. They started asking him to watch their worst habits, their most embarrassing flaws, because they knew he wouldn't judge. He would fix. By the end of the second week, the average scores had started to climb. More importantly, the soldiers' relationship with their rifles had changed. They stopped treating them like pieces of equipment and started treating them like partners. Specialist Chen became Thomas's informal assistant, having progressed so quickly that he could help others. One afternoon, Thomas found him working with a struggling private, repeating the same lessons Thomas had taught him. That's good, Chen, Thomas said as he walked past. The best way to master something is to teach it. But not everyone was happy with the changes. Lieutenant Dawson approached Thomas at the end of the second week. Master Sergeant, I need to speak with you privately. They walked away from the range toward a quiet area near a tree line. Sir, some of the other officers are questioning your methods. They say you're going too slow, that at this rate we won't have enough qualified marksmen to meet our quotas. Do they want qualified marksmen or good shooters? Thomas asked. I don't understand the difference, sir. A qualified marksman can pass a test. A good shooter can hit what they're aiming at when it matters. The Army has plenty of the first and not nearly enough of the second. Sir, I agree with you, but I'm getting pressure from above to show results. Numbers. Qualification rates. Thomas looked at the young officer for a long moment. Lieutenant, let me ask you a question. If you were going into combat tomorrow, would you rather have 30 soldiers who qualified with the minimum passing score, or 15 soldiers who can genuinely shoot? The 15, sir, obviously. Then tell your superiors that's what I'm building, and if they have a problem with that, they can take it up with General Morrison. Dawson nodded slowly. Yes, sir. There's something else, though. What is it? Some of the soldiers are asking if they can buy rifles like yours. Old bolt actions, I mean. They say they want to learn on something simple before going back to the modern equipment. Thomas felt something warm in his chest. Tell them they don't need to. A good shooter can shoot anything, but if it helps, them understand the fundamentals. I'm not opposed to it. That evening, several soldiers approached Thomas as he was cleaning his Winchester. They'd clearly drawn straws to see who would ask, and Martinez had lost. Sir, can we ask you about your rifle? Thomas looked up from his cleaning rod. What do you want to know? Where did you get it? Why that one? Thomas set down his cleaning supplies and picked up the old Winchester, turning it in his hands. The soldiers gathered closer. I bought this rifle in 1967 with my first Army paycheck. Cost me $83 at a pawn shop in Columbus, Georgia. The scope cost another $20. Everything I had. He ran his hand along the stock. The previous owner had carved his initials in the stock here, see? JMH, I never knew who he was, but I figured he must have loved this rifle to market like that. I added my own initials on the other side. The soldiers looked at where TG was carved neatly into the wood. I carried this rifle through 2 tours in Vietnam, used it in places I can't talk about through the 70s and 80s, had it in the Gulf in 91. Every shot I took that mattered in 23 years of service came from this rifle. How many, sir? Chen asked quietly. If you can say. Thomas was quiet for a moment. 37. 37 shots that I can confirm hit their target. And before you ask, yes, I remember every single one. The distance, the conditions, what I was thinking. You don't forget shots like that. Were you scared, sir? Martinez asked. Every single time, if you're not scared before. Taking a shot that matters. There's something wrong with you. The fear keeps you sharp, keeps you from making stupid mistakes. He looked at them. But the fear doesn't pull the trigger. Your training does. Your trust in yourself and your equipment does. Corporal Hayes spoke up. Sir, why didn't you ever upgrade? Get a newer rifle? I did. The Army issued me plenty of newer rifles over the years. Better, more accurate, more reliable in bad conditions. But this one? He held up the Winchester. This one knows me, and I know it. When I pick this rifle up, I know exactly how it will feel, how it will shoot, where it will hit. That familiarity is worth more than all the technical advantages of a newer rifle. He set it down gently. But don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying old is better than new. I'm saying familiar is better than unfamiliar. In 10 years, one of you might be sitting here with a soldier, talking about the rifle you're learning on now, the one that feels like an extension of yourself. That's the goal. Not to shoot my rifle or your rifle, but to shoot your rifle so well that it becomes part of you. Can we try it, sir? Chen asked. Your rifle? Thomas looked at the young specialist for a long moment, then nodded. Tomorrow, I'll let each of you fire 1 shot from it. Not because it will make you better shooters, but because I want you to feel what I feel when I shoot something I truly know. The 3rd week began with each soldier taking 1 shot from Thomas's Winchester. He made it ceremonial, almost sacred, 1 at a time, with the others, watching in respectful silence. Before each shot, he told them, this rifle has taken shots that mattered. It's carried the weight of decisions that can't be undone. When you hold it, understand that being a marksman isn't about punching paper targets. It's about responsibility. Private Morrison, no relation to the general, was 19 years old, fresh-faced and clearly nervous as he took the old rifle. Sir, what if I miss? Then you miss. It's just a target, but I want you to understand something. That rifle has never missed. Every time it failed to hit its target, it was because I failed it, not the other way around. The rifle does what the shooter tells it to do, always. Morrison settled in, took his time, and fired. The round hit center mass at 200 meters. How did it feel? Thomas asked. Heavy, sir. Not the weight, but the responsibility. Good. Remember that feeling. When it was Martinez's turn, Thomas watched him approach the rifle with reverence. The cocky private who'd laughed 3 weeks ago was gone, replaced by a soldier who understood what he was holding. Martinez fired and hit slightly left of center. I pulled it, he said immediately before checking. The target. How do you know? I felt my shoulder tense, just a little, but enough. The rifle did what I told it to do. Thomas smiled. You're learning. That afternoon, he gathered them all for a different kind of lesson. Today, we're going to talk about something the manuals don't cover, shooting under stress. He had them run wind sprints until they were gasping for air, their hands shaking from exertion. Then, without any recovery time, he had them shoot. Your heart rate is elevated. Your hands are unsteady. Your breathing is ragged. This is what it feels like in combat. Now show me your fundamentals. The first round of shooting was terrible. Rounds sprayed everywhere. Again, sprints, then shoot. The second round was marginally better. What's the difference between now and when? You shoot rested? He asked them. Everything's harder, sir, Hayes said. I can't hold steady. So don't try to hold steady. Use your breathing to time your shots. Fire between heartbeats. Accept that the rifle will move and work with that movement instead of fighting it. They trained this way for 3 days. Running, then shooting, doing push-ups, then shooting, carrying heavy loads, then shooting. Thomas was deliberately destroying their comfortable, controlled environment. Combat is chaos, he told them. You will never get the perfect conditions you train in. So we're going to train in terrible conditions until you can shoot well, regardless of circumstances. By the end of the week, they could run a quarter mile and still put rounds on target at 300 meters. Not perfect shooting, but combat-effective shooting. Lieutenant Dawson pulled Thomas aside. Sir, I need to tell you something. Go ahead. The other units on base have noticed the difference in our soldiers. The way they carry themselves, the way they handle their weapons. Other instructors are asking what we're doing differently. What did you tell them? I told them we stopped teaching soldiers to shoot and started teaching shooters to be soldiers. Thomas laughed. That's not bad, Lieutenant. Word of Thomas's methods had spread beyond Fort Benning. By the fourth week, he had visitors, a colonel from the Army Marksmanship Unit, 2 representatives from a defense contractor that made precision rifles, and a civilian shooting champion who'd won national competitions. General Morrison introduced them to Thomas at the range. Master Sergeant Garrett, these gentlemen have heard about your program. They're skeptical. The defense contractor's representative, a man named Walsh, in an expensive suit, spoke up. Master Sergeant, with all due respect, I've seen the equipment our tax dollars buy. State-of-the-art rifles with precision the military could only dream of 20 years. Go. Are you really suggesting that an old bolt action is comparable? I'm not suggesting anything, Thomas said mildly. I'm demonstrating that the shooter matters more than the equipment. I'd like to see that demonstrated, Walsh said. If you don't mind. What did you have in mind? The civilian shooting champion, a woman named Sarah Chen, no relation to Specialist Chen, spoke up. A competition. My rifle against yours. Let's see which matters more. Equipment or experience? Thomas looked at General Morrison, who shrugged. Your call, Master Sergeant. What are the stakes? Thomas asked. If I win, Sarah said, you acknowledge that modern equipment makes a difference and you incorporate more technology into your training. And if I win, then I'll spend a week training. Under your methods and publicly acknowledge the results. Thomas extended his hand. You've got a deal. They set up the competition for 2 days later. Word spread across the base, and what was supposed to be a simple demonstration turned into an event. Soldiers from other units came to watch. The defense contractor brought a whole team. Sarah Chen arrived with a rifle that cost more than some cars. It was a custom precision rifle with a computerized ballistic calculator, a scope that could range targets automatically, and a trigger system that guaranteed consistency to the thousandth of an inch. Thomas brought his Winchester. The competition would be straightforward. 10 shots at each of 4 distances, 200, 400, 600, and 800 meters. Best cumulative. Score 1. Sarah went first. At 200 meters, she shot a perfect group. All 10 rounds within an inch circle, dead center. The crowd murmured appreciatively. Thomas stepped up with his Winchester. He didn't rush. He took his time settling into position, finding his natural point of aim. Then he fired 10 rounds in smooth succession. All 10 rounds were within a 2-inch circle, just slightly. Off from perfect center. Master Sergeant Garrett, 98 points. Ms. Chen, 100 points. At 400 meters, Sarah shot another exceptional group. 9 rounds in a tight cluster, 1 slightly out. Thomas fired his 10 rounds. His group was larger than Sarah's. The old rifle and scope were showing their limitations at this distance. But every round was still on target. Master Sergeant Garrett, 94 points. Miss Chen, 98 points. The crowd was getting into it now. Thomas could hear his soldiers cheering for him, but he blocked it out. This wasn't about winning or losing. It was about proving a point. 600 meters. This was where Sarah's equipment really shone. Her ballistic computer made the calculations instantly. Her scope compensated for distance automatically. She shot a group that would have been impressive at half the distance. Thomas took his time. At this range, his old Weaver scope was at its limit. He had to estimate holdover, account for wind by feel, trust his experience. He fired 10 rounds. 8 were in the target. 2 missed entirely. Master Sergeant Garrett, 76 points. Miss Chen, 96 points. Thomas could hear the disappointment from his soldiers. He stood up, safed his rifle, and turned to Sarah. "You're an excellent shot. That rifle is impressive." She smiled. "Thank you, but we still have 800 meters. This was the test. 800 meters with iron sights and an old scope against computerized precision. Sarah shot first. Even with her advanced equipment, this range was challenging. She put 6 rounds in the target, 4 misses. Then it was Thomas's turn. He settled in behind the Winchester. At this distance, he could barely see the target through his old scope. He would have to trust everything: his experience, his instinct, his knowledge of this rifle that he'd carried for over 30 years. He thought about every shot that had mattered, every time he'd trusted this rifle, and it had delivered. He breathed out slowly and began to fire. The first round missed. He adjusted slightly, more by feel than calculation. The second round hit. He fired 8 more times, each shot a conversation between himself and the rifle. When the ceasefire was called, Rodriguez ran down range to score the target. Master Sergeant Garrett, 7 hits out of 10, 67 points. Thomas had lost. The final scores weren't even close. Sarah Chen had won, by a significant margin. Walsh, the defense contractor representative, was already smiling. "Well, Master Sergeant, I think that settles." "Excuse me." It was Specialist Chen, Thomas's student. "If I may, sir." General Morrison nodded. "Speak, Specialist." "Ms. Chen shot an incredible score with an incredible rifle. No one is disputing that. But I'd like to propose something." He looked at Thomas. "Sir, with your permission, I'd like to shoot Ms. Chen's rifle, and I'd like her to shoot one of our standard issue rifles." Sarah looked intrigued. "I accept." What happened next became legend on Fort Benning. Specialist Chen, who 3 weeks earlier had been a mediocre shooter, picked up Sarah's advanced rifle. He took his time familiarizing himself with it, asking her questions about the features, learning the equipment. Then he shot. His first group at 200 meters was good, not as good as Sarah's, but respectable. At 400 meters, he adapted to the rifle's characteristics and shot even better. Sarah, meanwhile, took a standard issue rifle, the same one she'd probably qualify with dozens of times, and shot competently, but not exceptionally. After they'd completed all 4 distances, the scores were telling. Specialist Chen with the advanced rifle, 356 points. Sarah Chen with the standard rifle, 312 points. Thomas's original score with his old Winchester, 335 points. Walsh was staring at the scoreboard in confusion. "I don't understand. She had the worse equipment, but she's a champion shooter. She should have done better." "That's exactly the point," Thomas said. Quietly, he turned to address everyone who'd gathered. "Ms. Chen is an incredible shooter. She proved that. Her rifle is magnificent. But notice something. When she shot equipment she wasn't intimately familiar with, her scores dropped. Not because she's not skilled, but because she and that rifle hadn't built a relationship." He gestured to Specialist Chen. "My student has been training for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Ms. Chen has been shooting competitively for years, but he was able to shoot her rifle better than she shot his, because I've taught him how to adapt, how to learn a rifle quickly, how to trust his fundamentals regardless of the equipment." Thomas picked up his Winchester. "This rifle is old, obsolete by every technical measure. Ms. Chen's rifle is objectively superior, but I shot within striking distance of a national champion because this rifle and I understand each other. That relationship, that trust, that familiarity, that's what makes a marksman." He looked at Walsh. "Your company makes fine equipment, excellent equipment, but equipment doesn't shoot. People do. And if you give the finest rifle in the world to a shooter who doesn't understand fundamentals, who doesn't trust themselves, who hasn't built that relationship with their weapon, you're just putting an expensive tool in unskilled hands." Sarah Chen stepped forward. "He's right. I've been shooting my rifle for 3 years. I know every quirk, every tendency. When I picked up that standard rifle, even though I'm technically proficient, I didn't have that connection. It felt foreign." She looked at Specialist Chen. How did you adapt to my rifle so quickly? Master Sergeant Garrett taught us that every rifle wants to shoot. Our job is to listen to what it's trying to tell us and work with it, not against it. Your rifle was trying to tell me where it wanted to point, how it wanted to settle. I just listened. Walsh was quiet for a long moment. Then he surprised everyone by laughing. I came here to prove that better equipment makes better shooters. Instead, I learned that better training makes better shooters who can use any equipment. Master Sergeant, you've made your point. Sarah extended her hand to Thomas. A deal's a deal. When do I start training? Tomorrow morning, 0600. Bring your rifle, but be prepared not to use it for a few days. She smiled. Let me guess. Broomsticks? You're learning already. Sarah Chen's week of training became its own education, not just for her, but for Thomas's soldiers. Watching a champion shooter struggle with fundamentals she'd taken for granted reminded everyone that mastery was a journey, not a destination. On her third day, after several humbling sessions, Sarah approached Thomas. I've been shooting wrong for years, haven't I? Not wrong, Thomas corrected. Incomplete. You learned to shoot your rifle perfectly, but you never learned to shoot. What's the difference? Put down your rifle and pick up Private Morrison's. Sarah picked up the young private's rifle, a standard-issue M4 platform. She settled into position and fired a group at 300 meters. It was good, but not great. Now pick up, Martinez's rifle. She switched rifles. This one was set up slightly differently. Different stock length, different optic height. Her group opened up noticeably. You see? You're a master of your equipment, but these soldiers are becoming masters of the craft. They can pick up any rifle and within a few shots, understand it well enough to shoot effectively. How do I get there? By starting over. By accepting that all your trophies and titles came from mastery of a specific weapon system, and now you need to master the skill itself. Sarah trained alongside the soldiers for the rest of the week. She struggled, she failed, she learned, and by the end of it, she could pick up any rifle on the range and shoot competently within minutes of familiarizing herself with it. On the final day of Thomas's 30-day contract, General Morrison organized a qualification course. Every soldier would shoot for record, using the Army's standard qualification test. But Thomas had a different idea. General, with your permission, I'd like to modify the test. Morrison raised an eyebrow. How so? Random rifle assignment. They each pick a number, and that's the rifle they shoot. No one shoots their familiar weapon. Master Sergeant, that's not standard protocol. No, sir, it's not. But it will prove whether I've taught them to shoot or just taught them their specific rifles. Morrison considered this. You're putting a lot of faith in 3 weeks of training. I'm putting faith in their fundamentals, sir. All right, do it. The soldiers drew numbers. Some got rifles they'd never, touched. Others got weapons with optics they'd never used. There was nervous energy in the air. Remember, Thomas called out, the rifle wants to shoot. Your job is to listen to it, work with it, trust your fundamentals. You've got this. The qualification course began. The soldiers took their time, adapting to unfamiliar equipment. Thomas watched with quiet pride as they applied everything he'd taught them. When the scores came in, the results spoke for themselves. Every single soldier qualified, more importantly, 70% shot expert, the highest qualification level. In a normal course, expert qualification rates hovered around 20%, and they'd done it with unfamiliar equipment. General Morrison stared at the scores. Master Sergeant, in 30 days you've accomplished, what we couldn't do in 6 months. I just reminded them of what they already knew, sir. That shooting isn't about the equipment, it's about the shooter. Thomas's last day at Fort Benning was quiet. The soldiers had given him a plaque, nothing fancy, just a simple wooden board with a brass plate that read, "The weapon was common, the marksman was not. Thank you for teaching us the difference." He stood at the range one final time, his old Winchester cradled in his arms. The soldiers had gathered not because they were ordered to, but because they wanted to say goodbye. Specialist Chen stepped forward. "Sir, I have a question I've been wanting to ask." "Go ahead, Chen." Of those 37 shots you told us about, the ones that mattered, do you ever regret them? The range went silent. It was the question no one had dared ask. Thomas was quiet for a long moment, looking out across the range toward the distant tree line. Every single one, he finally said. I regret the necessity of them. I regret that those situations existed. I regret that someone had to be on the other end of that bullet. He turned to face them. But I don't regret taking the shots, because in every case, that shot meant my friends, my fellow soldiers, got to go home. That someone's son or daughter or husband or wife survived because I did my job. He held up the Winchester. This rifle has taken lives. That's an ugly truth, and I've never tried to hide from it. But it's also saved lives, probably more than it took, though I'll never know the exact count. That's the weight of being a marksman. It's not about trophies or scores or qualification badges. It's about responsibility. Private Morrison, the young soldier who'd asked about missing, spoke up. Sir, how do you live with that weight? By making sure every shot mattered. By never taking a shot I wasn't absolutely certain of. By respecting the rifle, the skill, and the responsibility. Thomas looked at each of them. Some of you will deploy. Some of you will find yourselves in situations where you need to take a shot that matters. When that moment comes, I want you to remember everything you've learned here. Not just the mechanics of shooting, but the weight of it, the responsibility of it. He set his rifle down carefully. The weapon is common. You can buy one like this at any gun shop in America. But the marksman, the person, who can pick up that common weapon and do something extraordinary with it, that's rare. That's what I've tried to teach you. Corporal Hayes raised her hand. Sir, what happens now? You go home and we go back to regular training? Captain Rodriguez will continue your training, Thomas said. He's learned what I teach, and he'll make sure you don't backslide. But more importantly, you teach each other. Chen, you're good enough now to help others. Martinez, you've overcome your flinch. Help the next soldiers who struggle with that. Hayes, you've conquered your fear of pressure. Show others how you did it. He smiled. The best way to master something is to teach it. All of you are now teachers, whether you know it or not. Sarah Chen, who'd stayed for Thomas's final day, stepped forward. Master Sergeant, I want to thank you. I've won championships, but I've learned more in 1 week with you than in years of competition. You're welcome, Miss Chen, but remember, you already had the skill. I just helped you understand it differently. General Morrison approached, and the soldiers snapped to attention. At ease, Morrison said. He turned to Thomas. Master Sergeant, on behalf of the United States Army, I want to thank you for your service, past and present. You came here to fix a problem, and you've done more than that. You've reminded us all what really matters. He handed Thomas an envelope. Inside is a request. We'd like you to come back maybe a few times a year to work with new groups of soldiers, to make sure we don't lose what you've taught us. Thomas opened the envelope and read the letter. It was a consulting contract offering him a position as a civilian marksmanship instructor. I'm 73 years old, General, and you're still the best shooter on this base. We need you, Thomas. The Army needs you. Thomas looked at the soldiers standing before him. Young men and women who'd transformed from uncertain shooters to confident marksmen in just 30 days. He thought about all the soldiers who would come after them, who would need the same lessons. I accept, he said, on one condition. Name it. My first group of students comes with me each time. They help teach. This isn't about me passing on knowledge and then disappearing. It's about building a culture of marksmanship that sustains itself. Morrison smiled. Deal. 6 months. After Thomas Garrett left Fort Benning, Specialist Chen, now Sergeant Chen, stood on a ridge in Afghanistan. His unit had been ambushed, and he'd been separated from the main group with 2 other soldiers. They were pinned down by enemy fire from a position approximately 400 meters away. Chen had his standard issue rifle. He'd fired maybe 200 rounds through this particular weapon. It wasn't his familiar rifle from training. The scope was slightly different. The trigger pull was heavier. But as he settled into position behind a rock, he heard Master Sergeant Garrett's voice in his head. The rifle wants to shoot. Your job is to listen. He took a breath. let half of it out, found his natural point of aim. The rifle settled against his shoulder like an old friend. He didn't think about the distance. He didn't calculate the ballistics. He just trusted his fundamentals, trusted his training, trusted that relationship between shooter and rifle that Thomas had taught him to build. He fired. The enemy position went quiet. Chen fired twice more, then called out to his fellow soldiers. "Move, now!" They made it back to the main unit. After the firefight was over, his lieutenant asked him how he made those shots under such pressure. "An old soldier taught me that the weapon doesn't matter," Chen said. "What matters is the marksman." Back at Fort Benning, Thomas Garrett was teaching another group of young soldiers. His Winchester lay in its case beside him as he watched them practice with their modern rifles. Private Jennings, fresh from basic training, raised his hand. "Sir, is it true you shoot better than anyone with that old rifle?" Thomas smiled. "Private, I don't shoot better than anyone. I just shoot. And that old rifle? It's just metal and wood, common as they come. But together, when we understand each other, when we work as a team, when we trust the fundamentals, that's when something common becomes something special." He picked up his Winchester and held it up so everyone could see. The wood was worn. The bluing was gone in places. The scope was ancient by modern standards. "This rifle has taught me more than I've taught any of you. It's taught me patience, discipline, respect for the craft, responsibility for every shot." He set it down gently. "And the most important lesson it's taught me is this. Greatness doesn't come from having the best equipment. It comes from mastering whatever equipment you have." He looked at the young faces staring back at him. The weapon was common. The marksman was not. Your job, all of our jobs, is to become the marksman worthy of whatever weapon we're given. As the sun set over Fort Benning, the sound of rifle fire echoed across the ranges, old and young, experienced and novice, working together to master the ancient art of marksmanship. And in a wooden case beside an old man's chair, a Winchester model. 70 rested, its work not yet done, its lessons still being taught. Because in the end, it wasn't about the rifle at all. It never had been. The end.